Right after the server finally booted,
Yes!
this happened. I should have known it wouldn't be plain sailing. After all, this server's been knocking about since Tony Blair was in government. In this video, we're going to go through the process now of troubleshooting this fan error. Is it the fan that's failed? Do we need to reset what's called NVRAM on the server? Or even the worst one, have we got to buy a new motherboard for the server? I'm going to go through this video showing you how I'm going to use Windows Vista in a virtual machine to connect to what's called the ILO on a server to have a look at some of the diagnostics that are available. We're going to go on eBay and see if we can find a fan. We're going to reset the NVRAM on the server to clear all the settings and see if that fixes it. And I say I'm going to go and get a fan because even if it does fix it when we reset the NVRAM, I can show you in a little while how filthy dirty the fan is on this server. So I'm going to replace it anyway, irrespective, with a brand new second-hand part, reconditioned fan. So let's get cracking into this video.
Okay, let's get the fan in question removed. It's this fan here, which is the system fan. And that has its connection to the motherboard here. Pull that off. And then there's a finger tighten screw there. And the fan removed. Having a look at the fan, it's not obvious that it's faulty or it's not spinning fast enough, but as you can see, it's pretty dirty, it's cobwebby, and at the back here, we've got quite a lot of wear on the metal. I would imagine that the main problem with this is the bearing that's inside here can no longer spin. It's full of dust and dirt and no longer can spin fast enough. That's what I'm hopeful for. So that's where I'm going to go now and have a look and see if we can get a spare replacement part for this. HP did give you replace with spares and the part number. So we got something to search on eBay right away. I'm on eBay and I've put in the part number and searched, and this is what it's come back with. There are 8 results, not a lot, but this server is 20 years old. £111.59 for one there, that's crazy money. But £23.25, that wasn't bad. So I went ahead and bought this fan here for £23.25. And if it doesn't work, I can send it back within 30 days. We're going to fit that to the server, irrespective of whether clearing the NVRAM works or not, because I want to put a better quality fan into it than the dirty, filthy one that's come out of it. So irrespective of whether we can fix the issue, this fan's going to go into the server. To reset the NVRAM on the server, we're going to need to adjust a dip switch. That is the system maintenance switch. Now, in this view here, you probably can't see where it is, but it's down in the bottom left-hand corner by the CMOS. So I'm going to zoom in so we can actually see how small these dip switches are. Right down here are the system maintenance dip switches, and we're looking at dip switch 6, which is currently set to off. We're going to set that to on, and then we're going to boot the server. That will clear all of the information that's stored on the motherboard about the configuration, and we'll see whether that has an effect on the fan error we've got. I have set dip switch 6 to on, and I'm going to power the server for about 10 seconds, and then we'll turn it off, reset the dip switch back to off, and turn the server on.
Press the power button, switch the server on, gave it 10 seconds or so for it to reset the NVRAM. Then I went back, pressed the power button again and rebooted with it set, and unfortunately it didn't fix the issue. I was fingers crossed at this point when it came up, but then just as I thought I'd got it, the message displayed again to say that the primary fan had failed. And so we're going to be installing the fan that's coming from eBay, because the fan that's in the server is definitely not going to cut it. It's failed and needs to be replaced. The ML350 was the first model of server I worked on that enabled me to access it while it was powered down. What that means is, as long as there's power into the back of the server, you could always access it, even if you'd shut the server down. It was a feature that was called integrated lights out, and it was a godsend to people like me, because I could turn the server on even if it was switched off. I'm going to take you through this and show you how it works. But the first thing we've got to do is get this server connected to the network at my home so that I can access the integrated lights out. I'm going to show you how we do that now.
At my home, I have a Google wireless network using these. And underneath these, you have the ability to connect it via an Ethernet cable to your network. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bridge or connect this small network I'm going to create on my desk to the rest of my house Wi-Fi. And this is how we're going to do it. We're going to connect this Ethernet port here into this small network switch here.
One here will go into the back of my Google Wi-Fi device, and the one next to it is going to go into the back of the server in the ILO port, and that will enable this server to connect to my home network, pick up an IP address, and then we can connect to that IP address via my Mac desktop. This is the ILO port on the back of the server, and I've connected the Ethernet cable there to the back of the switch, and then the switch is connected via that Ethernet cable to the wireless device, which will bridge the two networks. This is the server in switched off power mode. You can see the light on the front. The server is actually still running electricity through it, and you can slightly hear the hum of the fans inside. And I can connect to this server via the integrated lights out now on my Mac and find out what the error messages are on the server. And when we had this kind of fault in the field back in the day, I could actually push the power button and turn the server back on and see what was on the server console without actually having to leave my office to go to the site where the server was installed. Now the ILO is connected to the network, what I'm going to use is this scanning tool here to scan my network and see if we can find the device. And you can see here, it's found a HP device on 192.168.86.30. This is going to be the ILO interface. The next thing we're going to do is get connected to it through a web browser. Okay, so what happens if we try and connect to the ILO of a server from 2006 in 2025? First thing we get is it doesn't support a secure connection. That's kind of okay because that's 20 odd years ago. We'll click on continue to site. Oh, it flashed up and then it disappeared because Chrome is a modern browser and the SSL version that's being hosted on the server doesn't match. And so it's an unsupported protocol and we can't connect to it at all using Chrome or Edge because it's based on Chromium, and Safari doesn't work either. So this is where we used to come up with the kind of challenges in IT. But what we're going to do is use a rather ingenious way of being able to connect to a 20-year-old server. Here we have a virtual machine and it's running Windows Vista Business. And that's the perfect choice for connecting to the ILO because it came out in November 2006. So this is perfectly positioned to talk to that age of server. On the virtual machine, I'm going to launch Internet Explorer. And then we're going to type in the IP address of the ILO that we discovered, and we'll get connected and get logged in. Okay, up comes the screen showing us the ILO that we can log into. It then switches to this default error, but that's okay because this would have happened anyway because it has a self-signed certificate installed on the ILO. Now, what are the usernames and passwords for ILO? They were hard-coded to the ILO, and if you hadn't got the original tag, you couldn't get into the ILO and reset it. You needed to have the original one that came with the server. And luckily this server came with it. So let's get logged in with these details and then I can show you how ILO works. Down the left-hand side, we've got some options for the logs on the ILO, and we can have a look at the ILO event log. And we can see here some of the previous events that have occurred on the server. And here under the integrated management log, we can see the fan errors. Error 611, primary fan failure detected. Fan solution not sufficient. So there are the errors trapped in the integrated management log on the ILO. Yes, we saw them on screen, but if you were connecting to this server remotely while it was powered down after it had crashed, you were able to see the information that you couldn't physically see because you were able to do this from your office rather than being able to drive out to where the server was located. First thing I'm going to do in the ILO is license the product. Now, back when I had these, we would have purchased a license for this product because although you can get in and do this stuff, you can't do much of the really cool stuff without a license. And down here on the left-hand side is the option for licensing, and you can put in your activation key and license the server. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I found a license key for this version of ILO online, and because we're just doing this for demonstration purposes, I don't think we're really breaking too many laws here by using this license key. So let's get that typed in now. Excellent, that license key works and we can activate the server. Now we've got a license installed, that gives us the ability to do some things here that are really quite cool under remote console. In the remote console, you were able to control and see the screen of the server even though you weren't there, because again, this was 2006. We need to install a Java runtime on this server. And that's not really something that anybody uses anymore, but we can get our hands on Java runtime 1.4.2 online on one of the archives that people keep of old applications. So what I'm going to do now is get that installed on the Windows Vista machine, and then hopefully we're going to be able to actually see what would be on the screen of the server as if we're actually stood next to it, which ironically we are because it's right behind us. But theoretically, what we're looking at here is me being in an office 30 miles away from where that server was in 2006. And this is how we did things when servers went down and we weren't able to get there immediately. We could do things remotely and maybe even save the day without having to drive out there. This is the ILO status screen. What we're going to do now is we're going to remote control the server using the remote console feature. So I'll go over to remote console and choose remote console. This will throw up another window. I've installed Java 1.4.2 on this server, so it's loaded up. It tells me that the server is powered off. What we can do now is go to virtual devices, go to virtual power, and we can press the button on the front of the server, which you'll see, and actually get the server to power on. Then I'll bring the console screen back up again, and in a few moments, once the server has started to boot, we'll actually see the front of the server screen here remotely, so we can see the error message that was on the screen. And this was super handy to do back in the day because I didn't have to visit site to be able to do it. That was what the key was to this functionality. Here we go. Server's booting up, and you can see everything that we were shown on the screen physically is now being shown to us remotely through this remote console. And we're going to see the error messages, and we're going to hear the beeps right now. And the server's going to power itself down. And what I'm going to do now is once it powers off, it will try and restart again, and then I'll just quickly press the button again, and that will make sure it's switched off. It hasn't even tried to reboot, actually. It stayed powered off this time, so that's fine. We don't need to press. Oh no, there it goes. How's that typical for you? Right, I press the power button, and down the server goes back into standby mode. Now, when I used to go into a data center or into a site where a customer was based, you didn't always know which server that was in front of you in the rack was the server you actually needed to work on. And the last thing you wanted to do was press the wrong button on the wrong server. Look at this example here I've got in this picture. You can see here, this is an actual rack from a set of servers I worked on about, 15, 18 years ago. And it's difficult to sort of see on here really, but you wouldn't know which one you were necessarily talking about when you were remotely on site. So there was something you could use called the UiD, which was a little blue light that would come on the front of the server that you could bring up by pressing the integrated lights out button to tell you which server you were actually working on. So we'll do that as an example here now on our server. We'll go here into the ILO. I'm going to turn the unit ID on, the UiD light on. That puts the light on, and you can see now, look, the blue lights come on the front of the server. So I know which server it is that I'm working on. This stuff was super helpful because there was nothing worse than going to site and maybe you hadn't got anybody else, a colleague or anyone to assist you, and you didn't actually know which physical server you were supposed to be working on. Even though you might have to make a model, there might have been more than one of them in the rack and they weren't labeled. The UID gave you the chance to actually find the server that you were working on and not press the button on the wrong server, or if you're in a data center, possibly somebody else's server. Anyone who's worked in IT will tell you sometimes you've got to do a bit of a workaround for something because things don't go how they're supposed to go. I'm going to give you a good example of that right here now, because what I want to do is upgrade the firmware on the ILO. But in order to do that, we need to get a bin file, which is the common name file extension for a firmware upgrade. And to get this bin file, we're going to go on to this website on the screen at the moment where somebody's got all of the HP ILO firmwares. It's actually links to HP's website. It's their own website, but the links are genuine to HP. And we're going to download the bin file so that we can actually put that onto the Windows Vista machine and then upload it via the ILO console. But you'll see in a moment where the tricky part comes into this mix. This was the file here that I've downloaded with the extension .scexe. Now, HP website plus the guy's website says to open that you need to use a program called 7-zip because there was no built-in extractor for zip files into Windows Vista, and then you can open that file and extract it and then get the bin file. But if we try to go to 7-zip on here and open the archive, we get an error message that says it's not an archive file, it's not valid as an archive file, but it is a valid bin file. It is a valid archive file is what I should say there on that. So let's get our Windows 11 virtual machine here. And I've already pre-downloaded that file onto this Windows 11 virtual machine that's got 7-zip installed. And now we can right click and open with 7-zip. And what we'll see here is you open that up and inside there is a file called scexe_temp. That doesn't look like a bin file either. But this is where you have to have a bit of workaround and have a go at things. We'll extract that file into the downloads folder on this Windows 11 machine. There it is. I'm going to right click on that file and now I'm going to choose to open that with 7-zip file manager. Now what we've got inside here is what we're looking for. There's the bin file. That's what we want. These are the files we actually want to get extracted. So I'm going to extract all of these files now into the downloads on the Windows 11 machine. And what we've got here is the exact file that we want. Here we go. We've actually got the integrated lights out version 1.96, which is the highest version we can go to on this age of server. And it tells you which products were affected. And there we go. ProLiant ML350 G4p, which is our server behind us. What happened there could be quite tricky sometimes and flummox you and stop you in your tracks, because you think, well, the file inside this zip from HP is just junk, it's rubbish. I've got a corrupt file. But what you have learned in my career is to just go a bit further and just say, I wonder if that's another file that's inside a file. And it was, and we got into it. And it's those sort of digging around and stuff like that that sometimes made the job super frustrating, but sometimes made a real sense of satisfaction when you worked it out and you knew that little trick, because then you wouldn't catch it out again in the future. And if you were guiding younger engineers, which I had a lot of time doing, I would teach them little tricks and stuff like that, and it'd make their day, and it'd make my day to see them succeed with it. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take that file back to the Vista machine and get it into the ILO. Back at the Windows Vista VM now, we're going to hit that ILO file on, and we're going to upgrade the firmware on the ILO. So we'll bring that back up on the screen now. This is the upgrade ILO firmware screen, and I'm going to select the image, which I've already saved to the desktop from the other Windows 11 machine. I've transferred this over, and I'm going to save that to the desktop. There's the bin file we're going to use. And then we click the Send Firmware Image button, and we get a pop-up saying that we need to agree to run this in the browser. And that's fine. We'll choose Run ActiveX Control, and it's going to run that script now. Send it. I think we're getting somewhere this time. It's doing something. Yes. Top left-hand corner, firmware upgrade in progress. That's about what we want to be seeing. Firmware upgrades are always a bit scary, because if the power goes out while you're in the middle of a firmware upgrade, usually means it's dead. Or you bricked it. You turned it into a large brick. And I don't have a UPS at home. I don't have anything. So if you have a power cut now, we're stiffed. I'm going to break the ILO. So fingers crossed that that doesn't happen. But we don't get power cuts here in Ironbridge very often. So hopefully that's not going to happen today. So let's wait for this to finish doing its thing. Come on. Are we done? Doing something else now. It's going to refresh. We get redirected in 56 seconds. So it's resetting the ILO is what it's doing now. I'll restart the whole ILO thing inside the server. And what I'm hopeful for is maybe it'll look a little bit nicer. I don't know if that was something that changed. It probably did change between 2006 and 2014. I'm hoping for that anyway. But we're going to find out. These bits were the worst, because you're waiting to know whether you've messed it up or not, or whether it's all gone really well. These bits were always the scariest part in my career. Just this moment of tension, waiting. We're in a better position now. Here we go. I just wasn't patient enough. It's always the way. Always the way. Firmware version 1.96. Excellent stuff. Has it changed much? No, I don't think it really has. No, I don't think there's much more that we can do. Serial, I think. Oh, configuration, virtual port serial configuration. That wasn't there before. That's the same. Administration. Yes. Not a lot changed in the actual use of the ILO, what it looked like, but we are on the latest version, which is the right thing to do. So that's that done. So we're done with the ILO now. All we're waiting for is for this system fan to turn up, which is probably tomorrow, and plug it in and hope the fan works. And if it works, then we can actually get down to starting where I wanted to go on this journey, which was to set up the server and install operating system on it. Good news, the fan has arrived, so let's get it open and have a look. Well, difficult to tell, but looks good. So we've got to go fit this to the server now and find out whether this is going to solve the problem and allow the server to boot. I really hope it does. Come on, let's have a result. The fan failed. But it's not over yet. Okay, what we've learned from that is it isn't going to be the system fan that's actually going to be at fault. Now, I've had a look at the CPU fan as well, and it is running, and I've taken the CPU fan off and started the server without it, and the server prompts there's no CPU fan. So the CPU fan is a bit mucky and dirty, so we're going to take that off and get that clean, which we'll come to in the next video. but I suspect it's the motherboard that's at fault. So what I've done, I've ordered a replacement motherboard. I picked up one on eBay, and it wasn't really loads of money. It was £40 off eBay, so that's not too bad. So we've got a replacement motherboard coming, and then we're going to fit that in the next video, and we're going to get this server working. I hope you've enjoyed what I've done so far. If you have, give the video a like, give me a subscribe, because I'm starting out from scratch and I'd really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys on the next video. Cheers.